from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
If we were going to be online in December with a cause, I wanted it to be something personal, something I understood and cared about. And then I came across an article about a 12-year-old girl in Nepal who was taken from her home by a man who came to her village and promised her very poor parents that he could get her a better life and a job as a maid in India. So this smiling 12-year-old girl crosses the border and is dropped at a brothel where she's violently broken in. And after she stops putting up a fight, she's made to service 20 to 40 men a day.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to the 26th season and this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, Dressember. Joining us via Zoom from Orange County, California to talk more about it is Marissa Marks. Marissa is the Senior Director of Partnerships and Programs for the nonprofit organization. Welcome to you, Marissa.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for being here. I want to start by having you tell us what Dressember is.
Sure. So Dressember is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We focus on anti-human trafficking. We're most well known for our style challenge that we host every December, where we invite people around the world to wear a dress every day in the month as a way to raise awareness and fundraise for the issue of human trafficking. So we raise all of this money in the month of December alongside thousands of others from 70 plus countries. And the money that we raise throughout the month is then used to resource global anti-trafficking work around the world.
Wow. Okay. Marissa, how did this whole idea come about?
Yeah, so our CEO and founder is Blythe Hill. She created the idea. She started doing Dressember while she was in grad school studying English and came up with the idea to wear a dress every day in December as sort of a creative outlet. And then it wasn't until later that she decided to attach a cause to it, which something was really near and dear to her heart, which is anti-human trafficking. So she started doing it in 2009, and then in 2013, it became an official nonprofit organization once she realized that others were joining her, were picking up on what she was doing via social media. And fast forward, this year we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary and $16 million raised for global anti-trafficking work.
Wow, congratulations for all the work that you guys have put into that. I want to ask you to talk to our viewers a little bit about human trafficking.
Sure. We could spend so much time talking about the issue of human trafficking. It's incredibly nuanced, very, very complex crime we're talking about here. The definition of human trafficking is the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or sex trafficking, sex act. So those are the two most common types of trafficking are sex trafficking and labor trafficking or forced labor. It's about an 80-20 split, sex trafficking being the most prevalent. And the issue is one that is certainly happening in our country here in the US as well as internationally.
Okay, and I want to put up a map for our viewers. And as we're doing that, talk a little bit about the international problem, Marissa, and how you guys were able to really break into that whole international realm, just having started from one woman.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, no country is really exempt from human trafficking. It is in all of our backyards. And this map here is showing China specifically, which experiences a great deal of labor trafficking, particularly in sweatshops. So I'm speaking about sweatshops. I'm talking about the garment industry, right? Who are making the clothes that we wear and producing the goods that we buy. There is a lot of forced labor and a great deal of labor trafficking in a country like China. Somewhere else like Latin America is experiencing high rates of sex trafficking. here in the US, we are certainly experiencing both. Sex trafficking and labor trafficking are incredibly prominent in the US, some states more than others. And what that could look like in the US here is for labor trafficking in the agricultural field is very common. The people that are farming for our fruits and vegetables are often not being paid a living wage or paid at all. Sex trafficking could look many different ways in the U.S. I'll stop there if you wanted to ask about any of those specifics.
No, that's fine, and thank you for that. I wanted to ask I know it's a loaded question, but who is most vulnerable when it comes to this issue?
That's a great question because some people are more vulnerable than other, and human traffickers really prey on the most vulnerable. So things like racism, sexism, classism all fall in connection with human trafficking. It's really a systemic issue that's sort of embedded in our societies. And there are multiple forms of systemic discrimination, and understanding the way in which they intersect with human trafficking is important. So, for example, people of color experience systematic oppression, and as a result are undeniably disproportionately affected by human trafficking. Similarly, youth in the US, a lot of our prevention work works with at-risk youth. So youth that have experienced instability in the home, poverty, other types of hardships. But I want to be careful and to never generalize that, because human trafficking can really affect anyone from any walk of life.
So, Marissa, talk with our viewers a little bit about, typically when we cover something like this, we want to talk about warning signs, right? So what's happening to these people? One minute they seem to be okay, and then slowly but surely, things are different. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, kind of depending on where you're experiencing, if you think you are identifying trafficking. So maybe you're an airline flight attendant, or you're working at a hotel or in the transportation industry. Something to look out for is an individual not being responsible for their own documents or having control over their own documents. If somebody is kind of controlling that aspect of their travel, that's a red flag. Unfortunately, human trafficking is incredibly hard to spot. It's extremely underreported because it is hard to see to the blind eye, and it's frankly happening, right in front of our noses, and we have no idea most of the time. But a few things you can look out for are, like I said, that kind of control aspect. Maybe there's someone in your life that you think is a victim of trafficking, and just maybe paying a little bit closer attention to the way that they're being treated in a so-called relationship, if it is kind of a boyfriend scenario of trafficking. I am always going to recommend, if you suspect something in your gut, to report it.
Yeah, and I think folks would want to know why the victims aren't talking to people about this. Kind of give us the backstory there. They're not coming out and saying that there is something wrong. Why is that?
Sure. Human trafficking is a pretty new phenomenon that we're all becoming more familiar with as the years go by. And so many people that have been trafficked never identified as trafficking victims, and now are realizing, so many years later that was actually trafficking. They were exploited by someone else. And I think that's really important to acknowledge, being able to identify it yourself, as well as the psychological coercion that's involved in being a victim of trafficking. Many people will say, why don't they just leave, right? If they're not physically being chained to the home that they're staying in, can't they just walk out the door? And it's all in that definition of human trafficking, which is the use of threat is a big part of being a victim of trafficking. Many people can't leave their trafficking situation because they are under threat. Their trafficker is threatening to hurt them or to hurt their family. So it's very, very complex, very nuanced, and a lot of it is very psychological for victims of human trafficking.
Marissa, what percentage of these victims are actually able to get out of those circumstances?
I wish I had an answer for you, but it's such a hard crime to collect data on. That's one of the issues, right? Is it's so underreported. Most victims never even have a case. But a few statistics that are out there are that like 1 to 2% of child victims are recovered. The UN, United Nations, has reported that only 1 out of 100 people are ever rescued from human trafficking. So while there's not like a standalone statistic on how many victims are getting out, it is incredibly low because of the underrepresentation of the crime and it's being underreported severely.
And those who do get out, quite a journey ahead of them, especially considering what you've talked about in terms of that whole psychological, physical. I mean, just their whole self has been damaged by all of this, and they're able to get out, and yet, yeah, they still need to try to figure out a way to move forward. Talk about that journey for those folks.
Yeah, the healing journey is long. It begins with, and every survivor is different, right? There is no one size fits all for anyone's experience of being trafficked. But a lot of the work that we resource in kind of the aftercare side is providing trauma therapy for survivors, counseling, just day-to-day support. And then once they are ready and not a minute sooner, and are ready to pursue another opportunity, such as like a job or education, there's also programs and support to do that. One of them is Dressember's scholarship program, but the healing from this is ongoing. I don't think it's something you can just kind of slap a Band-Aid on and move on. It's always going to be a part of these people's lives.
Talk about that scholarship program, Marissa. Tell us a little bit more about how you're helping these people get back on their feet.
Sure. So we launched Dressember Scholarship Program in 2021, last year, really in response to survivors of trafficking sharing a lack of resources around education opportunities, access to education. So we developed this program that provides support to cover tuition for survivors of human trafficking. So anything they would like to pursue, whether that be community college or a trade school. We have a PhD candidate right now. So really whatever education they want to receive to pursue their goals, their dream jobs, Dressember is here to support them. Unfortunately, a lot of trafficking takes place in kind of the adolescent years. It's very common. So if you are experiencing trafficking as an adolescent, you are much less likely to get a high school diploma, to pursue a higher education. So a lot of survivors now really missed out on those opportunities, and we hope to fill the gap and eventually help them achieve what we're all looking to achieve, right? Which is financial stability, sustained liberation, being able to have a roof over our heads.
Okay, and you're not filling that gap alone, Marissa. Talk about the partnerships that you have there at Dressember and some of the programs. I mean, your job must just be, ongoing, right? In terms of those organizations with whom you're partnering and the information and education, such as today, things like you're doing today.
Yeah, there are so many amazing organizations out there. And so the scholarship program is Dressember's own program. We take referrals from our partners, but we are working day to day with survivors on that. Most of our other programs are in partnership with amazing, locally led, culturally sensitive anti-trafficking organizations around the world. So we have about 20 partners right now working across 12 plus countries. And our strategy there is really, we can't do this alone. We need to come alongside and resource the already amazing programs that are out there. And we have 4 pillars that we focus on. So starting with advocacy, generating awareness, advocating on behalf of victims for things like legal support, and just kind of spreading the word about awareness and education when it comes to trafficking. And I mentioned earlier, our prevention works with a lot of youth. We do a lot of prevention here in the U.S. So we think about looking upstream, right? How can we stop this crime before it starts? And that's by supporting historically marginalized groups, especially youth. at the time of being like that they might be most at risk for trafficking. So our prevention works with foster care youth, homeless youth, runaway youth, LGBTQ youth. That's sort of our prevention pillar. And then you move on to intervention, which is what a lot of people think when they think of anti-trafficking work, which is providing a pathway out for victims of human trafficking. So working along law enforcement, training hotel workers, training people that are going to be on the front lines that can spot human trafficking. So that is a lot of our intervention work, which happens in the US and internationally. And then we move on to the survivor empowerment piece, which we're passionate about all of them, but the survivor empowerment piece, like we talked about, is critical to reduce recidivism, make sure that victims don't end up back in a trafficking situation. And that's providing them with the support of trauma therapy, access to jobs, long-term economic empowerment. So we focus on those 4 pillars, and there's many programs that goes into each of them. And it's really a holistic approach to fighting trafficking by hitting it from all these different angles.
Okay, thank you. Can you share a story with our viewers, maybe someone you've helped from kind of start to finish, just to give us an idea of how this process works?
Sure. There's so many stories, and some of my favorites are the survivor scholarship recipients, but we're just getting started on those, right? They're just starting to pursue their education, and we plan to walk alongside them for their entire educational journey. Another really kind of relevant, unfortunate thing we're working on right now is in response to the war in Ukraine, is providing resources in border countries to Ukraine, making sure that cross-border trafficking does not occur. So a story that just hit my desk this week was a program that we supported in Romania for psychologists to support young women and girls crossing the border from Ukraine to Romania. And there was one in particular story about a 12-year-old girl. And this is sort of the prevention work, right? Like we're preventing trafficking from happening at the border where we know it's likely to happen before it happens. And there's one story of a 12-year-old girl that was sent to Romania from Ukraine by herself. Her mother's a doctor. She's not able to leave the country just yet. And that young girl, I mean, who's to say what would have happened to her if the psychologist wouldn't have reached her at the border? But they did, thankfully. And now she is safe and working with a psychologist to travel safely to another country, which is Poland, to be with some extended family until her mother is able to leave Ukraine.
I can't even imagine the feeling that you get when you are able to witness firsthand what kind of a difference this organization is making to these people. And I want to ask, Marissa, how did you get involved with Dressember?
Sure, yeah. So I did my master's in human rights, and I focused on gender-based violence and human trafficking in conflict zones in response to the war. So I think that's why this story in Romania and Ukraine is really near and dear to my heart. Something I'm really, really passionate about, specifically with anti-trafficking, is the unfortunate circumstance that a lot of refugees and asylum seekers end up being exploited. So I did my master's in human rights and was focused on conflict in the Middle East, and as a result, gender-based violence against women and children. And pretty near after completing that and writing my dissertation, working at our Human Rights Research Center, I met the CEO and founder of Dressember, who's Blythe Hill, and was just amazed at the concept of Dressember, the creativity of it. And it wasn't until I got involved and that I realized, like, oh my gosh, wow, this is actually there's people behind these numbers, right? Like you see the statistic all the time that's 40 million people are currently being trafficked in our world. And Dressember has now raised $16 million. But to actually read the stories and the impact behind those numbers is really, really incredible. And I feel very lucky and grateful to be on sort of the hopeful side of anti-trafficking. This is a very dark, just heart-wrenching crime, and I get to walk alongside thousands of others that are taking a stance against this and not letting it just slide by. So I get to be part of this like fun, creative group while also making an impact. So it's a really special place to be in anti-trafficking.
Okay, tell us more about those individuals with whom you're working that are closest to home, the staff, right, at Dressember. Tell us about them.
The staff and the fundraisers. So people will say, like, how do our staff is small? How do 5 people raise $16 million? And I say it's not us. It's thousands of others around the world. So we are joined by 4,000 or 5,000 fundraisers every year that wear dresses and ties and share on social media, share what they're doing, that are just that have a fire lit inside them as well. This is something that a lot of people feel really passionate about, and thankfully so, right? Because we're going to need so many people in this to dismantle this crime. So I get to walk alongside an amazing team and thousands of others that are just taking a really, really tangible, harsh stance and saying, not on my watch. If I can raise $5 or $5,000 to make an impact, I'm going to do that in the month of December.
Marissa, not surprisingly, that's a great segue into my next question, which is, how can people participate? You talked about wearing a dress or wearing a tie. Now, I want to make this really clear. There are some people who are not dress wearers, and they might want to opt for a tie. There are others who love ties, and So talk a little bit more about how folks can really do this right in the month of December in terms of what their options are.
It is so much less about what you're wearing and why you're wearing it. So whether you want to wear a dress or tie or stripes all month or the same dress every month, it is a choose your own adventure. And this is just kind of a symbol, a segue, if you will, of how we're getting to do what we do. So it's very straightforward. You head to dressember.org. There'll be a button in the top right that says start a fundraiser. When you start a fundraiser, you're committing to wearing a dress or a tie in the month of December, however that looks for you. And then you're sharing that fundraiser with your community. You're telling them why you're doing this. People that care about you care what you care about. And a lot of people in your network will also learn so much for you and be so grateful that you're giving them the opportunity to join in on this with you.
Yeah, what a great conversation starter, right? I mean, for people to say, what on earth are you doing wearing that today? And you can get into the whole topic and the cause and the good of it. I do want to ask you, for everything that you've been a part of in Dressember, what your most memorable moment has been? Mm-hmm. Do you have one, Marissa?
It's always getting to see the work firsthand and meeting survivors. So I've gotten the amazing opportunity to visit some of our field partners, one in Bulgaria and one in Guatemala just this past year, and just to see the work firsthand and the amazing people that are just out in the field doing this work every day, from law enforcement to lawyers to case managers. That is always the most inspiring, to feel really close to the work. And while that might not be possible for everyone, we try to capture that and share it. So we have a few videos. If anyone is interested in seeing those trips in action, they're on our Vimeo. But that's always the most special, is getting to be that close to the work.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask you about some of the places you've traveled. Was there one place in particular that really stands out in your mind, other than what you've just mentioned, in terms of that opportunity?
Those two are the main ones. Bulgaria is focused on, Dressember was a part of building a Freedom Center in Bulgaria. So it's a holistic aftercare center for survivors of trafficking, just a drop-in center to come and receive support and be part of a community. And everything happens there, from counseling to, they have a social enterprise where the women are making scarves and selling them and getting paid to do so. That was really special. And then our partner in Guatemala focuses on violence against women and children. So just getting to meet some really special young girls that were just so inspiring to me. They've been through so much, and I left with such a full heart and such a fiery heart to continue doing this work.
Okay, thank you. We just have a couple minutes remaining. Tell us about the Dressember Collective.
The Dressember Collective is our monthly giving program. So I mentioned our kind of bread and butter is the December Style Challenge, but we are still functioning year-round, spreading awareness providing education, supporting victims and survivors. And really the way that we do that, the way that we sustain the organization is through the Dressember Collective. So if you are wanting to make a long-standing impact on anti-trafficking and to know that year-round you are fighting this issue, not just in the month of December, the Dressember Collective is for you. We share special updates from the field with the collective. We provide some brand partnership offerings. So we partner with a lot of ethical brands that are working against forced labor. So we get some fun stuff there. And it's just it's a great group of very committed monthly supporters.
Okay, thank you. We are talking with Marissa Marks today. She's joining us via Zoom from Orange County, California, to talk about Dressember. Marissa, I want to thank you so much for being a part of this program today, for your time, your expertise, and everything that you and your team are doing, not only here in this country, but worldwide. So thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate that. I want to thank you bet. I want to thank our students who are working so hard behind the scenes, and of course our viewers for watching. Anybody wanting to know more about Dressember, we're going to put this graphic up for you. You can go to Marissa and team's website. That's dressember.org. The National Human Trafficking Hotline is 888-373-7888. As we close, colorful scenes from autumn as seen through the lens of Ebony Filbert, a senior here at UNO. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at nebraskapublicmedia.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.